President of the West Coast Protective League. I represent the glass workers out here on the West Coast. I work for Gallo Glass. I'm a third-generation glass employee. I grew up around glass plants. My children also work in the glass industry. And this is an industry that has a lot of nepotism, has a lot of multi-generational families in glass. You can go to a glass plant and you can find 5 and 6 generations. Some of our families have gone back 100 years in this industry where they've gone from factory to factory. Mr. Robeson stated earlier that there was 15 glass container factories here in California. That number back in 1980 was actually 18 glass plants. It was responsible for around 20,500 union jobs with benefits. Over time, and I don't have a number on what we've lost on an average each year. I don't have that. But what I do know is right now we currently have 5 glass plants in the state of California, and we have approximately around 2,300 union employees with benefits, retirement, medical. And so with that, this is an industry that's real susceptible to the economy. There's not a large profit margin in glass. But then, you know, I've heard Senator Dutton speaking on the green jobs. We are green jobs. We have green jobs. You know, this is a product that doesn't affect the environment at all. It's an inert. It doesn't contaminate anything, and it can be recycled over and over and over again. And this is an industry on a whole that is recycling at about an 80% rate, which is pretty huge. In our furnaces, the more recycled cullet that we use in our furnace, if we use 10% cullet or recycled glass, we're going to save 3%, 2.5 to 3% on our energy, which is huge. And then when you look at the technology and the strides that are being made by this industry right now, is that we're lightweighting our wear as we speak. That costs money. You know, it's a lightweight. The glass container is huge. But
what does that mean? I'm sorry.
Lightweighting means less glass, less material in the bottle.
Okay.
And so that's a hard process because it takes a little bit of glass to shape a container. But if you can lightweight it, you're saving on the shipping, you're saving on the energy, you're saving on the material, and not counting the recycling end of this. You know, sometimes in our furnaces, we'll run up to 60 to 70% recycled glass if we can get it. And that's hard to get in California. So when you talk about, you know, I mean, I'm going to stray all over the place here. You know, I'm not an expert. But when you talk about this recycling and these jobs go away, what are you going to do with that recycled glass? You're going to increase the carbon footprint? And you're going to go against everything that you're trying to achieve? Because you're going to be trucking it to New York, or you're going to be trucking it to another state to recycle this glass, or it's going to go to our competitors. And some of this is already going to our competitors down in Mexico. And so right now we have to compete, and we're competing against China on one end. We got glass coming across the border, and these companies are doing everything they can to stay in business. People are going to buy this glass. Our customers are going to get glass. The question is, are they going to get it here in California? And so, you know, we need a level playing field. And CARB needs to be, all I hear is flexible. Well, we've spoke to them before, and they haven't been very flexible. You know, they need to really consider the benchmark to make it flexible for this industry. And, you know, and you spoke earlier about not getting the income tax. And, you know, what about the bigger picture? What about when we wind up without these jobs, and I mean all of manufacturing in California, and then we wind up in the social programs that the state can't afford now, and we're going to wind up in them roles? What about the decaying neighborhoods where these empty factories are going to sit? What about the broken down school systems that are going to suffer more? And then, you know, we got the small businesses that we support because we have an income to go to these small businesses and buy our goods. This is going to be the turning point in California. And we all can't go to work for Walmart. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. So, I mean, if you're skeptical, all you got to do is drive through San Leandro and Oakland. Drive down through Los Angeles and see these factories that have come and gone, you know, and the people that used to work there. We're starting to become the Rust Belt of the Northeast. And it is sad because a lot of these people, they're kids that talk about their grandparents and their parents working in manufacturing, and the last job they did was pack up their machines because the jobs went overseas or they went elsewhere. So, I mean, you take these factories, they are going to move.
Okay, let me go to him and thank you
Anyway,
for your comment.
that's all I have to say.
No, but thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the committee.
Thank you, Senator. John Larea with the California League of Food Processors. I'm kind of surprised I didn't end up on this panel to begin with, but you did hear from one of our members, so I'll keep this brief. I think the question that you asked Mr. Corey from the ARB was probably the most central question that was there, and that is, what is the goal of AB 32? What is the goal of the cap and trade? And his specific answer was that it was to reduce GHGs while considering specific factors of cost, economy, and community. And at times, I'm not sure that that's exactly what's happening, and I think that that's where they need to refocus this. One of the things that we're looking at in terms of food processing alone is that this goes right back to AB 32. There's a section in there when they create this regulation that they are to ensure that the activities undertaken comply with the regulations, do not disproportionately impact low-income communities. I know how familiar you are with low-income communities. I've watched you protect your own communities in your own districts. But the other solid concentration of low-income communities are the areas in which we operate. The small communities which depend upon us for the jobs, for the revenues, and for the incomes, and all the small businesses associated with those. We are out in those communities and in those the counties that have continuing 15 to 18% unemployment. And yet nobody right now can tell us what the impact, the economic impact of this is going to be on those communities once the cap and trade hits us. The second thing that they needed to consider that was contained in this is that they're also to consider the significance of the contribution of each source or category of sources to statewide emissions of greenhouse gases. The food processing industry as a whole represents less than 0.5% of the emissions in California, 1.7 million tons a year. Now that is insignificant compared to most of the rest of California, and yet we're going to be under a cap and trade. And not only that, but we're also under a medium leakage risk. Now, we deal with uncertainty. I mean, uncertainty in the ag community, uncertainty in food processing is just a fact of life. You can look at the Midwest right now. They have a drought now. Did they expect that drought last year? No. And it's not only affecting them, but it's also affecting our dairies out here. So now our dairies are suffering as a result of the drought that's there. And we're suffering from the uncertainty every year of whether or not we're going to have a drought. And God help us, we don't want that. But when we look at what cap and trade is doing right now, when we look at the fact that by 2015, when fuels start to come under the cap, when transportation starts to come under the cap, and our sources of supply begin to come under this cap. So farmers begin to experience higher energy costs. Transportation, which we depend on to move those products to our facilities, start to cost more. And then we lose 25% of our allowances, plus the base price of the allowance goes up in 2015. We're not only worried about an actual natural drought. The best way to characterize it is an economic drought. By 2015, we could experience an economic drought that we may never be able to recover from in terms of this. We may start losing facilities. And the types of people that are going, in order to be able to meet these obligations that are coming for such a minimal amount of these allowances, we're looking at essentially eliminating personnel. Mona didn't get a chance to talk about that, Ms. Schulman, but essentially they're looking at anywhere between 5 to 10% of the people being let go as a result of having to meet the cost of allowances, and we don't know what the cost of those allowances are going to be. So the question is whether or not, in considering specific factors and considering the amount of this, where should ag be? Where should food processing be? We can't move. We can't leave. So we have to adjust some other way. And if we're continually going to be under a medium leakage risk, if we're going to continually be pressed on this along with the rise in prices associated in 2015, we really don't know what we're going to be doing by then. Right. So thank you.
Thank you much, and that will let us adjourn. And we went straight through. Let me thank all the people who who stayed all the way through. It was easier to